The Austrian Grand Prix is over and it was victory for Lando, Norris and Mclaren. But now F1 is moving from the Red Bull Ring to the home of British motorsport, and that is Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, which means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing and then at the end of the video giving out my early predictions for the Grand Prix. If you enjoy the video then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top teams later on, so please do stick around for that. Yep, F1 is heading now to Silverstone and the British Grand Prix, which is where it all began 75 years ago, as the first ever Grand Prix was at this circuit. Admittedly, it did look a little bit different back then compared to now, but it is the home of F1, and also most of the teams are based here in the UK, making it a true home race for the majority of the teams. And Silverstone is a fantastic circuit for Formula 1. It is a high-speed track with some iconic corners such as Copse, Maggots, Beckett and Stowe Corner, just to name a few, which are all pretty high speed. Mixing with that is the infield section where there are some slower corners and heavier braking zones, as well as Club Corner towards the end of the lap, making it a great track for racing. Because of the layout of the Silverstone circuit, the teams will likely be bringing a higher to medium level of downforce. This will help them through the corners such as Copse, Maggots and Beckett, and also help them in the braking zones. Due to the number of high-speed corners that Silverstone has, it can be seen that this is a front-limited circuit, and because of that, I expect that we will see Red Bull back in the hunt. As I mentioned, Silverstone is a high-speed circuit and the tyres take an absolute battering around the track. Copse Corner, as well as the Maggots and Beckett section that follows, put the front tyres under an immense amount of stress and strain, and they can get very hot. And there's not really too many areas where the tyres can really catch a break, which is why historically Pirelli have opted to take the hardest tyres in the range. This year though, Pirelli has taken a bit of a gamble and gone a step softer with the tyres, meaning that the hard tyres are the C2 tyres, the mediums are the C3, and the soft tyre is the C4 tyre. It had historically been a fairly straightforward one-stop race. The length of the pit lane mixed with the hardest tyres meant that no one really wanted to do more than one pit stop if they could get away with it. And you can see that because in 2023, which was the last fully dry race, all the teams and drivers did a total of 23 pit stops, with the drivers using the mediums and the soft tyres. With Pirelli going a step softer this year, I can see, if it is dry, some teams being forced into doing a two-stop, which could add a nice mixture of strategy. That being said, the fact that they used the medium and the soft tyres in 2023 tells me that they could still probably get away with a one-stop strategy using one set of mediums and one set of hard tyres. Overtaking at the British Grand Prix is not the easiest, even though it is a good track for racing overall, and you can see that as last year there was a total of 26 on-track overtakes, and that is even with the race containing multiple shower periods, which is typically when we do see an increase in on-track overtaking. To help with overtakes, the Silverstone circuit features two DRS zones. The first DRS zone is on the exit of the infield section on the run down the Wellington Straight heading into Brooklands and Luffield, and then the second DRS zone is on the exit of Maggots, Beckett and Chapel heading down the Hanger Straight into Stowe Corner. Stowe followed by Club Corner is where we do tend to see most overtakes these days, just due to the nature of the circuit. Last year, the pole position lap time was set by George Russell in the Mercedes, and George set a lap time of a 1:25.819. During that lap, Russell reached a top speed of 325 km per hour, which is about 202 miles per hour. In the Grand Prix itself, the race fastest lap was set by Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, and Sainz set a time of a 1:28.293. With step softer tyres being provided this year, if it is dry, then I should see that both of these lap times can be beaten quite easily. I just want to say, if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about Red Bull. For Red Bull then, the Austrian Grand Prix was a disaster as the team failed to score any points as Max Verstappen was involved in an incident on the first lap and Yuki Tsunoda had an awful race and awful pace and he was lapped twice. For Red Bull, the Austrian Grand Prix was always going to be a tricky race. The circuit doesn't particularly suit this year's car, and Max's qualifying didn't really help, with him qualifying down the order. Admittedly, that was due to a yellow flag, but that did put him at risk of an early crash, and that is what happened. Thankfully for Verstappen and Red Bull though, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone should be a much better weekend for them and a much better circuit for them. The track layout should nicely suit their car, with plenty of high-speed corners, putting the front tyres through their paces instead of the rears. That being said, one issue for them is that the tyres are a step softer this year, which could hurt them in the race, especially if it is dry and hot. For Verstappen, it is looking more and more likely that he is out of this year's World Championship. Max would likely require the two McLaren drivers to come together and take each other out, which of course nearly did happen in Austria to be fair. One benefit for Max though is that as of me writing this, the British Grand Prix could be a wet race, which would very nicely bring Verstappen back into contention, even if the dry tyres are a step softer this year. For Mercedes then, it was a very lonely race for George Russell as he didn't have the pace of Ferrari or McLaren, and teammate Antonelli crashed into Verstappen, ending his race in the very first lap. I did say in my preview for Austria that the Red Bull ring would suit Ferrari more than Mercedes, but I didn't expect it to be by this much. Going into Silverstone though, I think that we will see some kind of Mercedes resurgence. This is a good circuit for them historically, and there is a chance of rain. Typically when we do see rain, Mercedes do tend to go well, so we could see something great from them. They dropped back to third in the Constructors' Championship, but with how they do tend to go here, then I expect that we will see them back up to second place in the Constructors' Championship. For George Russell, it was a lonely race, but for Antonelli, he made a silly error, and he has to pay the price at Silverstone, as he will now be taking a 3-place grid penalty for the Grand Prix. For Ferrari then, it was a very solid but lonely race for Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Leclerc had a very solid race and was a good amount faster than teammate Hamilton, despite the issues with the brakes forcing him to lift and coast for a lot of the Grand Prix. Teammate Hamilton didn't quite have the race pace of his teammate, but to say this has historically not been a great circuit for Hamilton, he did very well to only finish one place behind him. Going into Silverstone, I can see it being a very tricky weekend for the Ferrari team. This circuit is one that could see them struggle with balance issues, especially through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. For Lewis Hamilton, this is his home race, and a place where he has had incredible success in the past. If he can have a solid qualifying performance, then I think this could be the first Grand Prix where he outpaces Charles Leclerc properly, especially if there is a sprinkling of rain, which could always happen at Silverstone. Finally for McLaren then, it was a dominant performance by them, and it would have been a totally dominant race regardless of if Verstappen was actually in the race. The Red Bull Ring circuit suited their car perfectly, and we saw them just pull away and leave the rest of the field for dead, despite them almost taking each other out with some very close and aggressive racing in the first stint of the race. Lando Norris managed to hold off Oscar Piastri, but Norris was much slower than his teammate when it came to the medium tyres. But he is now heading to his home race, and with the fans' support, I expect we could see a solid race from Norris. Teammate Piastri tried as hard as he possibly could, but he just couldn't crack Lando Norris, who held his nerve despite the massive pressure. Going into Silverstone, Piastri will likely need something special. The circuit is one where Norris has beaten Piastri at both times, but given how this year has been, I expect that Piastri will be very close to his McLaren teammate, and also George Russell, who I do think will be in the mix at this race. So with that in mind then, what are my early predictions for the British Grand Prix? Well, for pole position, I'm going to go for Max Verstappen and Red Bull to bounce back and take pole position. But what about the top 5 in the Grand Prix? Well, in P5, I'm actually going to go for Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari. P4 will be George Russell in the Mercedes. P3, only just ahead of the Mercedes, will be Oscar Piastri. P2 will be Lando Norris, and I'm going to go for Max Verstappen to win the British Grand Prix, as I do think there will be a bit of rain, which will help Verstappen to finish in first place and win the race. But those are my thoughts. The question is, what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.